We are going.
Doing it live.
Back at it.
Fuck it!
Like a crack addict.
All right, what have you got going on today? What you been up to?
It was a good day. I just woke up, and my laptop and my computer, or my desktop is in my room, so I just got water and creatine for breakfast, and then just worked. That's about it today. And then I met with a woman who's starting a podcast or wants to start a podcast but doesn't know how. So I met with her and just kind of gave her a rundown, and I'm going to meet with her for free for like 15 minutes once a week just to give her a little bit of guidance in starting it.
Nice.
And then she has a pretty good community around her, so if she can get funding, then the next step would be like telling her what it would cost to work with me, and et cetera. And so went well.
Awesome.
What about you?
Work and ran a couple of errands, really, for the most part. Just, grocery shopping, haircut, and work. Yeah, that's it. Just a couple of meetings with new clients and a lot of food review.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A good day. I mean, it wasn't wasted, I suppose, eh?
No, definitely not. Productive.
Sweet.
Nice and calm at work, which is always good. Gives me a chance to catch up on things.
Mm-hmm. Just going at it.
Yeah.
Nice.
Might be starting on as a consultant with my mom's job, which would be pretty cool because they're trying to, they've been doing military and EMS and police clothing for a long time. They're trying to break more into the civilian market.
Interesting.
And so they might be talking to me about some of that, developing some of those items because they've been bringing items home for me to look at for, quite a while and asking me what I think. And they've been kind of struggling to develop this new civilian stuff. So I was like, well, why don't you just bring me on as a consultant actually, because you actually come to me and talk to me about this stuff.
Huh. So what would that entail?
Just basically giving them pointers on their designs, on what they can improve, and just how they can improve their prototypes for these new civilian products, mostly as far as design goes, and actual utilitarian elements like pockets and shit like that. And
so they would pay you not on commission, but on just like a base retainer fee or something like that?
No idea. We just started talking about this 2 days ago.
Sweet. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
But yeah, that'd be really cool.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's a cool new development.
Definitely. Yeah. Be a fun way to make a little bit of extra money. I like fashion.
Yeah, there you go. That's great. That's awesome. That's fantastic to hear.
Indeed. Well, I guess since no more asshole on the Bible podcast, we'll just move right into the first story that we're going to talk about. But before that, we'll go over why we're doing the Bible analysis, which is because we both are under the shared belief that the Bible is not a historical text. It was never meant to be taken as a historical text that actually documents things that really happened. It's just a series of allegories that are meant to be analyzed and have a lesson taken away from them about how to live your life properly and not be a detriment to the people around you.
Yeah, and I think in taking it literally, you're missing out on a significant amount of the wisdom and lessons that could be taken away if looked at differently.
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And just as a quick reference, so anytime there's three we're not talking about Jesus as much today, but three kind of words that are in the Bible often that we kind of have our interpretation of. We have the kingdom of heaven, which is more like the state of mind that you're in. So it is living a life of peace, living a life of love, living a life of a grounded, principled life. God is highest moral compass. Satan is like that lower moral compass. So when we reference God, we're referencing our conscience, our higher moral compass, the principles that we live by.
Yeah.
Jesus is a physical manifestation of that in acting out our highest moral compass.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So heaven is a place that you can exist within in your real life, and hell is also a place you can exist within in your real life. It's not a place you go when you die. Heaven is where you go if you abide by that higher moral principle and you're living a happy, fulfilling, peaceful life. Hell is where you go if you're living in chaos by living a shitty and destructive life.
And I was listening to a podcast today one of my clients I was editing for, and they were talking about the Bible for most of the podcast. And it's interesting. I'm blanking on the word, but it's interesting that what this guy was saying is he's saying, well, once you're in heaven, you're in heaven forever. And the seat of the table, there's a seat of the table for the devil and the seat of the table for God. And once you're at the seat of the table with God, you're at there forever. And I think we kind of differ in that in a little bit in saying that, like, you can go in and out of heaven and you can go in and out of hell on earth.
Definitely. If you've been living a decent life for a long time and you fall off the wagon and start living like an asshole and just being shitty to everybody around you and not trying to, better yourself, then you can absolutely stop living that peaceful, happy, meaningful life and let that slip.
Definitely.
Yeah. And same with hell. If you're miserable right now, that doesn't mean you're going to be miserable forever. You can do something about it.
Definitely. Awesome. So what's our first story?
First story today is the story of Samson. And that's a fun one. I was looking for stories that related to I was looking for stories that related to either wrath, becoming a better person, or rather redeeming yourself after being a shitty person, or what was the third? Dwelling on the past. And this one I looked into because it seemed like it fit wrath really well, but I think it actually better suits just the idea of kind of what can happen if you do kind of stray away from your, we'll call it faith, which is just, abiding by that higher principle as opposed to your lower moral compass. What happens if you stray away from that? So, Samson was he was the product of divine birth, which I actually forgot until I reread the story. His mother was barren, and so an angel came to her and told her, like, hey, God is going to make you pregnant with a son who is essentially going to be used as a weapon against the Philistines, who ruled over the Israelites at the time. And he told her, no drinking alcohol while you were pregnant with him, no eating unclean foods while you were pregnant with him. So like stick to kosher, so no shellfish, pork, and all that stuff. I don't know what all the kosher foods are, but then he went away. She went and told her husband about what had happened, and he was like, okay, well, what the hell, how do we raise him, though? Like, what are we supposed to do when he's here? It is kind of pertinent that he told her not to drink alcohol because I didn't know what fetal alcohol syndrome was back then, I guess.
Yeah.
That's not just a given. That's a little unsettling. But so they were able to get in contact with the angel again and talk to him about how to actually raise him, and they just told him never let a razor touch his head. He shall be a what's the word for it? Nazarite. He was to be a Nazarite from birth. And a Nazarite is somebody who takes a specific oath to God, which then imbues him with superhuman strength, essentially, from God. And those vows are no wine, grapes, or any other grape products, so like no vinegar, even, for example. No going near dead bodies, which is going to come up, and no cutting the hair on his head. And it specifically does say head. A razor shall not touch his head. So I don't know if that includes the beard.
Right.
But either way, he has to let his hair grow, not drink wine or anything else made from grapes, and he can't go anywhere near corpses because it's unclean. Let's see. Then we've got... Okay, Samson's first marriage. So Samson is in Timnah, just kind of prowling around, and he sees a woman, a Philistine woman, who he finds very beautiful, so he goes back home, and he says, hey, Mom and Dad, I saw this Philistine woman that I think is really beautiful. Go get her to make her my wife.
Naturally, that's what you would do, right?
Naturally, because women were treated as property in the Bible. So I think that everybody that's picketing outside of Planned Parenthood should also be picketing for all of the women currently protesting in that crowd to be treated as property, because it's in the Bible.
Yeah, right.
That'd be a fun way for anybody that sees any of those, those fucking yahoos protesting. Yeah. Just make your own sign that says all of the women protesting here want to be treated as property. Parentheses. It's in the Bible.
There you go.
But Anyway, moral mistreatment of women aside, his parents object because she is a Philistine. You know, you want to marry one of these uncircumcised people's people? What's wrong with you? And he says, no, she's beautiful. I want her. Go get her. None of them are aware that God is using her as a way to get Samson close to the Philistines. So I don't know if this is the first example of Samson kind of breaking away from his faith a little bit with lust, in that he just sees this woman and he's like, I want to marry her, even though she's the enemy. I know nothing about her. I've never spoken to her, but she's hot. I want to marry her.
Yeah.
I don't know if it counts, though, because it was literally God's plan. So, but using our interpretation of what God is, maybe that's his higher moral compass telling him that there is some way that he can utilize this woman, maybe, you know, to do what is ultimately good. You need to do something that is ultimately bad for you in order to accomplish something good in the long run. Could be. I'm not sure there. That one's a little, you know. God interfering with people gets a little bit complicated.
It certainly does.
Let's see. So, let's see. Samson is bringing his parents to Philistine to meet this new bride. And on the way there, he's separated from his parents a little bit when this happens. He is attacked by a lion. And because he's been imbued with the strength of God, he is able to, let me read the exact quote in the Bible. Powered by God, he, quote, tore the lion apart with his bare hands as he might have torn a young goat, end quote. So I guess how you prepare a goat is like,
yeah.
That's how I prepare an animal after I've hunted.
In the old urban streets of South City.
Yeah. I mean, if you catch a deer roaming around your front yard, it's confusing, and you become enraged by that confusion. I personally become extremely enraged when I'm confused to any degree.
Yeah.
And I think that's a perfectly appropriate response.
Yeah.
So he tells nobody about this. Doesn't tell anybody that he killed the lion, not even his parents, so nobody knows. Now, on his way to the actual wedding, separate instance, he comes across this lion corpse again, and he finds it full of bees and honey. They've infested the corpse, and they've filled it with honeycomb and have cultivated it. And he reaches into this lion's carcass and starts eating honey out of it with his bare hands, which, A, disgusting, B, you're breaking your vows again. You're going near corpses.
Okay.
Or I guess this would be the first instance of him hardcore breaking his vow and going near a corpse, because I don't think killing counts, because they just died, so you have a chance to get away from them, you know.
Once it's rotted, probably is like...
Yeah, exactly. Once it goes from being fresh to a little bit spoiled. But anyway, first of all, ew. Second, breaking his vows, straying away from his faith again, which is that's important, just because, without going into any spoilers, you know what eventually happens. Beyond that, there's more buildup of him breaking his vows in little bits and in little ways before that ultimate thing happens. So, finds the bees, eats the honey, and then he goes to the wedding, and while he's there, he makes a bet with the Philistine people that are, you know, there to celebrate the wedding. People have come with him. People have come from around Philistine to celebrate this wedding. The riddle, or the bet, rather, he makes a bet with them based on a riddle. If they can figure out the riddle, he has to give them 30 sets of spare clothing, which is a symbol of status and wealth back then, if you have spare clothes, basically. And if they can't figure it out, they have to give him 30 sets of linens. So,
seems like he could just cheat. Nope, you didn't get it right.
It does seem like he could cheat, and he does, because he gives them the riddle: out of the eater, something to eat; out of the strong, something sweet. It's the lion and honey in the lion. Nobody else knew that this happened. It's a riddle about something that literally nobody else could possibly ever figure out the answer to. He's cheating.
Yeah.
So first of all, 2 ways he's kind of breaking away from his vows here, just breaking away from not the vows specifically, but just his faith. He's gambling and he's cheating, both wrong in the eyes of God. So, riddle given in bad faith, it'd be like if I gave you a riddle about an event or a party that you did not attend.
Like, where's the basketball? Where'd you hide the basketball?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Or
that's lore.
Something related to my like, hey, I've got a riddle based on something that happened in my 4th grade elementary class at that school that you didn't attend. But anyway, so he gives this riddle in bad faith, and for 3 days they're trying to figure it out, and they can't, obviously, because duh. And so they go to his new wife and they ask her, like, you got to figure this out for us. We're going to be humiliated if we lose this, bet to him, because we're supposed to be ruling over you people, and we don't have a bunch of spare linens laying around. Like, that's a lot of linens. So the word used in the Bible is nags. She nags him so much that he tells her what the answer to. She nags him so much, rather, that he tells her the answer to the riddle.
And she just does this. She just like betrays her husband for no reason.
Essentially.
Yeah.
There's it really doesn't clarify why she sides with the Philistines over her husband. I mean, in her eyes, she probably mind you, he chose her based on appearance. They did not know each other literally at all. So she doesn't know that she's dealing with a psychopath here. She probably just thinks that she's like, okay, yeah, these are my people, and I know all of that. These are my friends, so I don't want them to be fucked over here. So that's Samson. What's the answer to the riddle?
I'm so curious.
Yeah. So she pesters him. He gives it to her. She gives it to them, and they tell him the answer to the riddle, to which he replies something along the lines of, had you not plowed the field with my cow, you wouldn't have known the answer to my riddle, or whatever the fuck. Basically, like, if you hadn't have betrayed me and convinced my wife to betray me, you wouldn't have known the answer, so fuck you. And then he went and killed 30 of the Philistines and gave the winners of the bet riddle their clothes as their prize for getting the riddle correct.
He's a total fucking psychopath.
And I believe this was the first time he said that he would have his vengeance against the Philistines, which many times throughout this story you are going to hear him say that and think, I feel like he's gotten vengeance like several times over for this original cheat riddle that he gave them and that they cheated on in response to his cheat. So let's see.
And you could attribute what he's gone through. You could attribute his emotions to wrath.
Absolutely, okay. Yeah. So this is where wrath does start coming into play, and really just his affinity for following his emotions comes into play as opposed to logic and reasoning. He married somebody based on lust. He went and murdered 30 people because they cheated on a riddle. It's like, first of all, you shitty fuck, you cheated giving them the riddle. So why don't you just call it a wash and nobody gets any linens? So, yeah, he is a slave to his emotions, and that's a recurring theme, and that's important. So I'm glad that you brought that up. So let's see. After he kills the 30 Philistines and leaves, he kills them and goes off. His new wife's father gives her away to one of Samson's companions that came with him to the wedding. Because, Samson just murdered 30 people, we assume he probably doesn't want to marry this woman anymore who just betrayed him and caused him to do that.
You would think she would be upset about him murdering 30 of her people.
That as well, but I don't think that her opinion really comes into the equation here because, again, she didn't really have a say in him just being like, yeah, I saw her and you go get her for me.
Yeah,
That's my wife now. So I don't think her opinion really matters, but you would assume that I assume, would assume that he was like, yeah, fuck her, betraying bitch,
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Samson goes back for his wife quite a long time later. I think they said it was harvest season at this point. I can't remember when all of this started precisely, but it's been a little while, been a minute. So goes back for his wife. He finds out that she has been married off to someone else, and the father of the bride is like, well, no, I assumed you hated her. So, no, I gave her away to your companion. Isn't her younger sister much more attractive anyway? And this enraged
Someone's about to die.
Samson was even angrier at this point. So
someone's about to get killed.
This is, I didn't even have to take notes for this one because we're at the foxes now. So Samson, this is where his inner psychopath really starts to show. Instead of doing something, not normal, but a little bit more, just something within the realm of what a normal human being would fathom as a response to something. Instead of just grabbing his own torches and burning down crops or, slaughtering some livestock, he goes into the woods and he catches 300 foxes.
Okay, normal, yeah.
300 fucking foxes he catches. 300 of them. You seen how foxes move?
It would take years.
Catching one fucking fox is impossible. They don't have sophisticated traps. Anyway, this man, imbued with the strength of God at this moment, apparently, because he caught 300 foxes, catches 300 foxes, ties them 2 by 2 together at the tail with, I think, rope, and then also ties a torch in between their tails, and then, I guess, swinging them around like nunchucks, hurls them into the crops and the fields of all of the Philistines and burns all of their crops to the ground.
This is what a normal person would do.
This is what a normal person would do. This is a healthy response
right.
to somebody giving your wife away, who is your property, to someone else. After that, let's see. Yeah, so after the fox incident, the old wife and her father are killed for basically bringing down the wrath of this murderous lunatic down upon their people.
Mm-hmm.
This makes Samson even angrier. He is so thirsty for vengeance at this point. He viciously attacks and slaughters the men who killed his old wife and her father. So he's chock full of rage and out for blood and vengeance. Most importantly, vengeance. He keeps mentioning vengeance. He is very driven by getting revenge. So
he's almost, you could say, blinded by vengeance.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Let's see. After he slaughters them, he hides in a cave. After that, don't jump around on me notes. Let's see. Sorry, lost my place here. Okay, after that, a large group of Philistines approaches a large group of men from Judah and ask them to please bring them this terrorist Samson who has been ruining the lives of everybody for the last God knows how long.
He's been doing that.
He has been doing that quite a bit. And so about 3,000 men, I think, 3,000 men from Judah come to Samson and tell him, hey, these guys really want us to bring you to them so that they can, kill you because you've kind of been a bit of a nuisance.
Don't shoot the messenger. We're just here to tell you what's going on.
Yeah, so Samson basically says, I only did what they did to me. I only did unto them what they did unto me.
Huh.
Which I would argue is maybe not true.
It's a rather skewed balance of what's been going on.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, they always say 2 wrongs don't make a right. What about 3,001 wrongs don't make a right? You've far outplayed them at this point, my guy. So he basically tells them, I'll go with you if you promise that you will not kill me by your hand. Do you make that promise? You guys won't kill me, you'll bring me to them? And they say, yeah, okay. And he says, okay, well then you can tie me up and bring me to them. And he is brought to the Philistines. He breaks free from his bindings, and using the jawbone of an ass, slaughters 1,000 more of them. 1,000. He has now killed 1,000 more of them using the jawbone of an ass, which again he has now broken his vows again and gone near a corpse to get the jawbone of an ass.
Huh. Continue.
Slaughters them all with the jawbone of an ass. After that, Samson leads the Israelites for 1,000 years, for 20 years.
Okay.
Leads the Israelites for 20 years.
Which in Bible time is like 12 minutes.
Basically, based on the fact that people live to be damn near a millennium old. Yeah. So,
okay.
Not very long.
So he took over and he starts leading them for 20 years.
Yes, Samson takes over. He is now the leader of the Israelites for 20 years. However, after those 20 years, Samson starts to go a little bit astray and away from his faith again. He starts... he doesn't... Yeah, no, he just starts veering away again. He goes to... where is Delilah? I can't remember where Delilah is exactly, but she's another Philistinian. But this woman is a prostitute. So, mingling with a prostitute, probably not that cool in the eyes of the Lord, although Jesus did do it.
Prostitutes are a reoccurring motif almost in the Bible.
Yeah, which, I would imagine it was probably... Back then, per capita, there were probably more prostitutes.
Way more, yeah.
Especially because it probably wasn't illegal for a long fucking time.
Yeah.
But anyway, he meets this prostitute named Delilah and is smitten with her again, following his lust and emotions as opposed to, his vow to God and his faith in general. He starts to trust her way too much. The Philistinian lords, as soon as they realize that this woman is in bed with Samson, literally, ask her to please find out what this guy's weakness is. He is ruining our lives. Please, for the love of God, figure out how we can stop him. So, immediately, right away, she starts asking him, what's the secret to your strength, Samson?
Very subtle.
Very subtle. Like, right away. She starts asking this, and Samson knows that she is trying to betray him because he lies to her 3 times.
Fool me once, shame on you.
It's like he didn't even get fooled. He knew that she was betraying him from the start. That's why he lied, right? First, he tells her, well, if they were to use 7 unused bowstrings, then, I wouldn't have been able to break out of my bindings. So she ties him up with used bowstrings in his sleep, and then at a certain point she calls in some Philistinians, and then she's like, oh my God, Samson, the Philistinians are upon you. And he's just like, oh no, I'm free. And he kills all of them. So then she comes back to him, and she's like, what the hell? You made a fool of me. What are you doing? How do you actually...
You ruined my assassination attempt on you.
Yeah, exactly. Totally doesn't address that at all. Neither of them do in the story. She says all of this, you humiliated me and blah, blah, blah. So he says, okay. It's because they need to use brand new rope that's never been used before. They've only ever used rope. If they use brand new rope, I can't break out of it. So she ties him up with brand new rope in his sleep, calls some Philistinians. Same thing. Oh my God, Samson, the Philistinians are here. Oh no, I'm free again. And he fucking kills all of them. Third time around, same thing. You humiliated me. Oh, well, if you would have just braided my hair 7 times, I wouldn't have been able to kill them. That takes away all my power. And so this time, she, again, while he is asleep, calls in some Philistinians and is like, oh my God, Samson, they're here. And he's like, I'm not even tied up this time, you idiot. And he kills all of them. And so the 4th time, she's like, you don't love me. How can you... By the way, I forgot to mention this. This is the same card that his first Philistinian wife pulled with him to get him to tell her the riddle. How can you say you love me if you won't tell me the answer to your riddle? So she uses the exact same tactic. How can you say you love me if you won't tell me what your weakness is? And so he eventually tells her, fine. It's my hair. If you cut off my hair, I will lose my strength. I made that vow with God, and I have been, what was the word again? I have been Nazarite from birth.
Okay. Seems like after the third attempt, she'd just give up.
We'd think after the third attempt, he would maybe be privy to the fact that telling her what your actual weakness is not the best idea, right? Like, you know what she is going to do. She is going to call them in while you're sleeping, and now you're not going to have any hair or strength. And that's what happens. So when he falls asleep in her lap, and she calls in somebody to cut his hair, and then she calls in some Philistinians to capture them, he gets up, tries to attack them and defend himself, but he doesn't have his hair anymore. And at this point, God has had enough. You know, he's already been straying away from his faith so much at this point. This isn't implicitly stated. This is just kind of how I'm interpreting this. Like, he's already broken his vows quite a few times, right? Or just strayed away from his faith in general. This is just like the last. It's like, now your hair, you idiot. And because of your idiotic trust in this woman who you absolutely shouldn't have trusted, but you did because you let your emotions get in the way again. What are you doing? So loses his power. These men take him, blind him, and put him in chains and put him on basically like hard labor.
How do they blind him?
They gouge his eyes out. Very biblical. And they put him they put him to hard labor for a long period of time and don't make it a point to give him regular haircuts, essentially. And eventually they decide, right. Eventually they decide to have a big festival celebrating essentially the fact that they have finally subdued this murderous, raving lunatic that has been destroying everything for years. And while they're having this festival, there are thousands of them there, thousands of Philistines celebrating underneath a big concrete, I guess we'll call it a massive gazebo. I don't know what to call it. It's just a big palace. I think it's called a palace in the Bible, but the certain descriptions make it sound like it's not a completely enclosed thing. Either way, large concrete structure, thousands of people inside, thousands of people overhead on the roof or balcony or whatever. They drag Samson out to entertain them, as they've been doing quite frequently as he's been in prison. But during this festival, somebody calls for him to be brought out so that they can basically jeer at him. And he asks the person bringing him out to lean him up against the pillars that support this giant structure that they're having this festival in. And he prays to God, please God, with this last bit of strength, I give myself unto you so that I can finally take out all of these enemies of you and your people. Grant me the strength to bring down this structure and kill thousands of your enemies. And so God grants him his strength so that in his last dying moment, he can bring down this Colosseum, we'll call it, and kill another like 5,000-6,000 of them. I think it was a lot more, another few thousand he killed. So the main things that stand out to me in that story are, first of all, Samson is imbued with the strength of God from his birth, which is very key. Just something to keep in mind throughout the story. He is very, very driven and controlled by his emotions. He is constantly following his lust or love, whatever you want to call it, but constantly pining over women that he knows nothing about just because they're attractive and he wants to sleep with them, essentially. Giving his trust to these women even though they have clearly demonstrated they are not trustworthy. Giving into wrath, and God may have been happy about him using his wrath against the Philistines, but it was ultimately his downfall that led to them labeling him as a terrorist and blinding him and imprisoning him. So I think that the story of Samson it's about a few things, but the main thing I think it is about is no matter how strong you are, no matter how with God you are currently living, no matter how heavily you are ascribing to living by that higher moral compass, It's possible for you to stray away from that and lose that strength if you intentionally behave in a way that goes against what you know is right. He made this vow with God to not cut his hair, stay away from corpses, and not have any wine. I don't recall it ever mentioning him having wine or grape products, but he regularly played around with corpses. That just seemed to be a fucking hobby of his after a certain point. And
Hobby of a serial killer.
Hobby of a serial killer in the making, just playing around with animal corpses. But, excuse me, he, lost my train of thought. What did I just say? Damn it.
Well, you can lose that higher moral compass when you live by your emotions.
Yeah, well, anyway, he was regularly playing around with corpses. Eventually, he ended up getting his hair cut off because he was giving into, I would say lust is probably the most arguable, like, anti-God move that he made that led to his hair being cut off. Like, he fell for this woman's deceptions even though he, like, knew that he shouldn't have, just because he was fucking her, basically. She's a prostitute. It wasn't even like his new wife. It was a prostitute. So, yeah, I think it's just meant to teach you in a way that no matter how strong you currently are, no matter how right with God, quote unquote, you currently are, you can absolutely fall from grace. And beyond that, I also think that it means that living that way, whether it be wrathfully or just not faithfully, we'll say, and sinfully, which, by the way, that's probably another kind of definition breakdown I should give, is if I say like, sinning, I don't mean like going against the literal commandments and what would by biblical definition be considered a sin. I just mean doing things that are generally considered morally not good. You know, just being scummy to people. If you're intentionally making someone's life more difficult, but you're doing it in a way that doesn't technically ascribe to one of the 10 Commandments or one of the 7 deadly sins, like I would consider that sin.
It's going, yeah, I'd say sin is going like acting directly against your higher moral compass.
Exactly, yeah. So that's the way I'm using that. So if you live a life of sin in that context, it can be a means to an end. Ultimately, he did achieve his goal and wipe out thousands of Philistines, which is what God, or maybe his higher moral compass, needed him to do. But if you use that sinful lifestyle, that wrathful lifestyle, as your means to getting to that end, you might destroy yourself in doing so.
And I don't have enough context around like who the Philistines were, but I can imagine like our higher moral compass isn't asking us to slaughter thousands or higher. Like I would imagine that the Philistines represent something.
Yeah, and I don't know exactly what that would be, but the common theme for the Philistines in the Bible is that they are the enemies of the people of Israel. They are constantly at conflict with the people of Israel. They have ruled over them and oppressed them at points in the Bible. So they might just represent a broad idea of evil and sinfulness to a certain extent. That's just off the top of
Speculation.
My head, first idea. Yeah. But I think that might be what they represent. Maybe, generally speaking. But what are your thoughts on the story of Samson?
Well, immediately I think of I guess it's the Jungian concept of the shadow and integrating the shadow. And it seems like a lot of people in our day and age, when they're struggling to integrate their shadow, like in a weak society, struggling to integrate our shadow is considering ourselves to be good people and not having teeth and not being powerful, but you still consider yourself a good person because you don't act on things because you're scared, not because you have the power to do it.
Yeah, you think you're virtuous because you're harmless, whereas
right.
Being virtuous is actually being capable of doing some harm, but choosing not to do so. I mean, you don't have a choice in the matter if you're incapable of causing harm.
Right.
You're not deciding not to harm people if you're too weak to do so.
Right. So in this scenario, I would say Samson has integrated it in the other way. He has that power and that rage and that harm, being capable of harmful, being capable yeah, being capable of being harmful, but he hasn't integrated it properly to where he can sheathe that. That's the first initial thing I think of. And then the other main thing that sticks out to me is what might seem rather obvious, and there's probably more layers to it, but it's significant that they blinded him. And Samson is blinded now, literally, because of his rage. And, we often hear rage blinds you. Well, in this scenario, he was blinded by rage. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's like these stories, when you hear, like, it's obviously story, because if someone asked you what your weakness was and then they tried to do tried to enact violence on you after figuring out your weakness, and then you do it 3 times in a row, that's not sensible, right? Like, that's
foolishness.
Yeah, foolishness. And it doesn't even seem like it was rage that, like, allowed him to keep doing that, but it was blinded by rage, by lust. He was blinded in many scenarios in this case. Mm-hmm. And those are the 2 things that immediately stick out to me.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with the shadow concept for sure. I think that he has over-integrated it. He's allowed his shadow to overtake his better being. He hasn't really integrated it. He's just let it take control a lot of the time. Not all the time. He's not constantly murdering people. He does a lot, but he allows it to show in an uncontrolled manner. Mm-hmm. Having it integrated would be the capability of bringing it out when it's necessary, not allowing it to come out anytime you become the least bit upset with somebody, like because they cheated on your cheat riddle, so you go murder 30 people.
I wonder if he's lost my train of thought. Let me try to get it back. Well, is he an anti-hero? Is he a hero in the story? Is he a villain? Like, what? He's acting on God's word, essentially, so he's technically the hero in this scenario.
It's hard to say, yeah. So I watched a couple of different videos about the story of Samson, just to see what some other people's takes on it were, and one person came to the conclusion that Samson at no point in this story was the hero, which I agree with the fact that he is definitely not a full stop hero. Like, definitely not. He's a murderous psychopath throughout the majority of the story. He's definitely not a straight up hero, but anti-hero might be a better classification for him, because he is ultimately doing what God wants him to do, which is why I think that there is something in there about the potentiality to utilize your wrath and your other negative character traits to achieve things. That is something that you can do if you're a very angry person, for instance. You could probably utilize that in like the combat sports field. Mm-hmm. If you're naturally angry, going and getting into fistfights with people regularly in a sanctioned manner might be good for you. Mm-hmm. But if you utilize that rage very consistently, especially in ways that aren't not just achieving what God wants you to achieve, in certain ways allowing himself, not just with the wrath. With the wrath, he was mostly doing what God wanted, but like with the lust, allowing Delilah to betray him out of that foolishness. I completely lost that's happening a lot this podcast, isn't it? We're losing our train of thought mid-sentence.
Could be considered a cautionary tale.
I know where I was going there. So God did not want Samson to lose his power. Definitely not. His whole goal with Samson was to use him as a tool to wipe out as many Philistines as possible. So not every way that he broke away from his faith, let's say, was actually helpful to him. And maybe part of the message within that is that even along the way, beyond the fact that you'll lose yourself completely in the end, you're going to damage yourself along the way. Because the wrath, that aspect of it, did ultimately get him, to achieve what his higher moral compass, let's say, wanted him to achieve, which was wiping out a bunch of evil. He lost himself in the process.
Yeah,
Your higher moral compass might lead you to believe things that are not necessarily true. You know, in trying to achieve the goals that your higher moral compass is trying to get you to achieve, you might become misguided and stray from that path if you don't stay focused on that higher moral compass and what the actual goal is.
I think I would need to understand more background on the Philistines to properly understand like why it's so necessary that he attacks them and wipes them out according to God's word.
Yeah, I would like to get a more clear idea of what I think they represent. I do feel like to a certain extent, not that I have enough context to have a good understanding of what they are, but just generally between the story of David and Goliath and this story, just those being the two that we have talked about recently, they are regularly at odds with God's people. So they represent people not living by the word of God, for sure. That is something that they represent. And I'm sure it goes deeper than that, but on the surface level, they are just, whereas the Israelites are God's people who are trying to live by God's word, the Philistines are the opposite of that. They are the yin to that yang.
Yeah, because certainly even our conscience wouldn't tell us wipe out a group of evil people. Even if they were evil, I don't think our conscience would say slaughter them and cheat them and act in the way that Samson did.
Sure, and it might be meant to be interpreted a little bit less literally than actual slaughter, whereas it's more just a euphemism or whatever for just wiping out the idea of evil evil action or evil within some sort of system, not necessarily wiping out the people perpetrating that evil with actual violence.
Right. Okay, cool. Any other thoughts on Samson?
I don't think so. I had fun going over Samson, actually, because it went into a little bit more depth than I expected.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, well, we'll hop into the next story then.
Definitely. And you are doing Solomon, correct?
Correct.
Is that 25?
Yeah.
All right. Take her away, Daddy-o.
Okay, the story of Solomon. So Solomon is the son of David. David was King David. He was well-renowned. We'll maybe get into his background another time, but a well-renowned king.
We'll eventually get into a lot of shit.
Definitely. And so Solomon was one of the later sons of David from a second wife, and I believe that this wife originally had a son before Solomon with David, but it was through adultery, so God killed the baby off early on.
Rightfully so.
Right, naturally. So the story goes, King David is dying, and one of his oldest sons, wants to become king, and so he gathers all these people, and says, follow me, I'm going to become king, and they're celebrating. And David's second wife or whoever, but the mother of Solomon, Bathsheba, something like that. These names are very fun to figure out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but
fun to pronounce.
Bathsheba is what I'll say, and she asks, and doesn't give us any explanation, but she says, David, make my son Solomon king. He just goes, okay. Cool. Enough said. So he makes Solomon king, and now Solomon becomes king. And so the king, David, then took an oath, as surely as the Lord lives, who has delivered me out of every trouble, I will surely carry out this very day what I swore to you by the Lord, the God of Israel. Solomon, your son, shall be king after me, and he will sit on my throne in my place. So Solomon becomes king. Now, Solomon's brothers are terrified, and they're frightened, and they're running away, and they're hiding in the altar because they go to grab the horn of the altar because they think surely he will not kill us at the horn of the altar. Solomon becomes king. They're all afraid. And so we won't go, the story isn't as long as Samson or easy to string together, I suppose, but
sure. Anyway. Samson's a particularly fun one.
Yeah.
So you can't get that lucky with all of them. I mean, there's got to be a little bit of filler.
Yeah.
It's a long book.
And so David says, and remember, he's speaking to Solomon after he's declared Solomon king. And remember, you have with you Naam, son of Gera, the Benjamite from Bahurim, who called down bitter curses on me the day I went to Mahanaim. When he came down to meet me at Jordan, I swore to him by the Lord, I will not put you to death by the sword, but now do not consider him innocent. You are a man of wisdom. This is David talking to Solomon. Mm-hmm. You will know what to do to him. Bring his gray head down to the grave in blood. So David doesn't want to kill him, but Solomon, take care of him. Okay. So we'll scatter. We'll go on a little bit later. So we're skipping ahead, and I'm bringing these up because they're just interesting pieces. Mm-hmm. One of the oldest sons of David, who originally was trying to become king, his name is Adonijah. We'll say that Adonijah.
Do we know how many sons he has at this point?
Multiple, but there's like 4 or 5. I don't know.
And how many are kind of fighting for kingship right now?
Now that Solomon has it, none of them are fighting for kingship. They're just scattered.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, how many?
It was really just main 2. It was Solomon and then the old one. We'll say the oldest son, Adonijah, the son of Haggith. Okay. And he went to Bathsheba, Solomon's mother, and Bathsheba asked him, "Do you come peacefully?" And he says, "Yes, I do." And then he asks Bathsheba, "Please ask King Solomon. He will not refuse you to give me Abishag, the Shunammite, as my wife." Now, Abishag, when David was dying, she was a virgin, a beautiful virgin, and she laid and comforted David because he couldn't become warm for some reason. He was unable, even under covers, he was unable to become warm. So she laid with him, but they never had sex. So now Adonijah, the eldest son of David, is asking Solomon, basically, can I marry her? Solomon gets fucking pissed at this. I have no fucking clue why. So Solomon says, "Why do you request Abishag the Shunammite for Adonijah?" This is him talking to his mother Bathsheba. "You might as well request the kingdom for him." Then King Solomon swore by the Lord, "May God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if Adonijah does not pay with his life for this request."
A lot of unreasonably angry responses.
It's just like sporadic.
Small little things.
It's very sporadic. Okay, and so then that happens. And then there's another brother, Joab, 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 we'll say Joab. And now Joab realizes that Solomon's cracking down on motherfuckers. And when the news reached Joab, who had conspired with Adonijah, though not with Absalom, whoever the fuck that is, he fled to the tent of the Lord and took hold of the horns of the altar, assuming that Solomon wouldn't kill him there. Well, Solomon killed him there.
Sounds like him.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
doesn't
that's
sound like a very righteous guy that's going to obey the laws of
Yeah.
sacred ground.
Yeah. So that's all preliminary, and I have no idea what to make of any of that. So then we kind of skip ahead.
Well, let's bullet point important parts through there from the very beginning.
Okay. David is dying. His first son wants to become king and tries to become king. Then David's second wife or mother of Solomon comes and says, "Make Solomon king." He makes Solomon king. Just because all of the, and I would imagine maybe because of his already wisdom, but it kind of mentions that, kind of doesn't. And then all of his brothers are scattering and scared that he's going to come and like kill them all.
Rightfully so.
So, okay, we'll skip ahead. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon during the night in a dream. This is something that a lot of people kind of think of. This is like one of the main things of Solomon. In a dream, and God said, "Ask for whatever you want me to give you." This is God talking to Solomon in a dream. Solomon asks, "So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong, for who is able to govern this great people of yours?" Now, this is the New Version Bible, whatever that's called. In the King James Bible, he says, "Give me wisdom." Now, why that's notable to me is if you're going to ask for wisdom, you must already have wisdom.
Yeah, definitely.
Right?
You have to be wise to a certain extent already to recognize the importance of wisdom.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's we talked about this. Where does that originate?
Right.
It's like what came first, the chicken or the egg?
Yep. And that's where I would like start considering or implementing the Holy Spirit into something like this. So
are
then
you going to get into that whenever we finish up with?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
So God said to him, "Since you have asked for this and not for long life or wealth for yourself, nor have asked for the death of your enemies, but for discernment in administering justice, I will do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be."
Translation. I'm impressed.
I'm impressed.
I'll give that to you.
So that's I'm always wondering, and there's a little bit more to this that we'll get into, but I'm always wondering, when a father is a brutal father and he's like, let's say, beats his son, or he does drugs, or he's a gangster, whatever it is.
You mean real life?
Real life,
Yep,
real life.
Yep.
And sometimes the son will go towards the higher moral compass. Sometimes they'll follow in their father's footsteps, or their examples' footsteps. Let's say.
Yeah.
How do we know, like, what gives someone the ability to choose one path over the other? And for me, the Holy Spirit is tough. We kind of have relatively understanding of God. We have a relative understanding of Jesus, but there's the Holy Trinity, and the third part of that Holy Trinity is the Holy Spirit. What is the Holy Spirit? And that's where I start to just, like, I don't know, luck. Like, I don't know how to describe it, but the Holy Spirit seems to be part of whether someone decides to follow the righteous path or follow in the negative examples they had set for them.
Yeah, maybe the Holy Spirit. It sounds like your interpretation of it. Maybe the Holy Spirit is that element of, let's say, divine intervention, where the idea of that higher moral compass is just kind of thrust upon you without you really making an attempt to do so.
Yeah.
What was your experience in that way, where you kind of became self-aware, or let's save that discussion for the end of the story. I'll make a note of that.
Okay. So that's that. So really the most notable thing about that to me is, in order to ask for wisdom, you must already have wisdom. That's just an interesting point worth thinking about and talking about and discussing.
Definitely. Absolutely. And
it's like God, and so God gave him that, but it's like almost as if God didn't have to give him anything because he already had it. So then this is the most notable story of Solomon. This is skipping ahead a little bit further. This is years later, whatever it may be. So God said to him, so that's that. And so now we'll switch ahead. So these two prostitutes, they're in the same house, and they each have a newborn child. One prostitute smothers her baby at night by a mistake. She sleeps on it, kills it. She replaces the other prostitute's baby with her baby. And then she has the baby from the other prostitute suckle on her teat to make it hers, I guess, whatever, like dominance, like alpha thing. I don't know.
That's how that works. If you make the baby breastfeed from your breast, it is now your baby.
Yeah, she's asserting her dominance.
We don't make the rules. We're just playing the game.
Just playing the game. So they go, what the woman who got her baby stolen, she's like, what the fuck? So they take the baby to Solomon, and the living baby. And Solomon, in his wisdom, says, I have an idea. One person is saying it's your baby, the other is saying it's your baby. Let's do this. Let's cut it in half, and then we'll just give you each half of the baby. And the prostitute whose baby it really was says, no, give it to the woman, let the baby live. And the other prostitute says, fuck it, chop that bitch in half. I don't want either of us to have it. And Solomon says, okay, I know who is the real mother, the one who wants the baby to live. And all Israel heard the verdict the king had given. They held the king in awe because they saw that he had wisdom from God to administer justice. So that's that story. Like, and again, like, to our point about this whole podcast, like, that doesn't on the surface level, that doesn't make sense in the slightest, right? Like, obviously, neither of them would be like, no, don't cut this fucking baby in half. Like, what is wrong with you? But when you take it literally, this story doesn't really make sense. But if we try to extract lessons from it, we can figure out different things, and maybe that's what we can go into in discussing it.
Definitely. So, what do you have any main takeaways from that initially?
That story, no, if you do, go ahead, because I need to think about it.
On face value, I mean, the beginning of the story is really tough because Solomon, maybe he did need to request wisdom from God, because I don't know if he necessarily demonstrated a lack of wisdom specifically early in the story, but he certainly demonstrated a lack of couth and reasonability, right? I mean, he killed one of his brothers. Yeah. So
And it gives you some explanation that the brother was unjust in whatever he was doing, and so there was a reason.
Sure. Yeah. So, but as far as the baby story goes, I mean, I don't know if the emphasis is really on Solomon so much as Solomon was just kind of used as a tool to represent kind of a symbolic, used as being symbolic of just wisdom, generally speaking. And that story is I guess evidence that I don't even know how to word it. It's capable to tell who. I don't even know.
It's tough.
I don't even know. I mean, it's like I can't think of a grand message off the top of my head that's teaching us. It's like, yes, the actual mother of the child would be the one that wants to keep the baby alive in that scenario, and I guess maybe it's teaching you to just use that kind of judgment in your day-to-day life to figure out who is deceitful and who's not. I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, it's like we're figuring it out as we go. And on surface level, I would say, like the baby, if someone who once is willing to sacrifice even their own baby, even in order to let it live, they're willing to sacrifice what is right or what is just to them, and they're willing to sacrifice that so that everyone can live with justice. Like everyone can live with.
Yeah, if you can accept a personal injustice in order to ensure the justice of somebody who is sacred to you.
Yes, almost like this may be the totally off example, but like if you come up with an idea and then someone's like, it's a really good idea and it can help a lot of people, and then someone's like, oh, that was my idea, and then you could take away from that by saying, no, it was my idea, like fuck you, and then you delude the message or the importance of that idea by arguing and bickering over it, rather than just letting it go and saying, okay, this idea is going to help people. I don't need the glory from that idea.
Sure. Like if you were in a Breaking Bad type situation where Walter was initially part of Gray Matter Industries and he stepped away from the company, it became very successful. It wouldn't do him any good to try to break down that company because he is no longer a part of it. Ultimately, he started the company because he wanted to achieve something with it, and with or without him, they have achieved that. So it wouldn't be productive for him to just break that down because he is no longer benefiting from it. Like this woman doesn't benefit from her baby also now being killed, but she could at least rest easy in knowing that her baby is alive and well.
Right.
So maybe the mother is more the subject of, maybe the mother is more meant to be the focus as far as taking away a message from that story. If you are put into a position where you have to make a personal sacrifice in order to make whether it be your baby or just somebody that you care about's life better, or just to keep them alive, period, that's worth that injustice to you. Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say so. I can get behind that.
Yeah, because I can't. Thinking of Solomon specifically, it's tough for me to think about what we could take away from his actions, and I'm sure I could think of something if I thought about it a little bit more. Maybe, I don't know. But maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, off the cuff, I would
off
say
that dome.
Off that dome. I would say that you have the most to learn in that story from the mother of the child who was to be cut in half.
Yeah, I'd say so. Cool. Well, those are our two stories for the day. Any wrap ups in regards to that?
Well, I did want to get back to the self-awareness thing. So, asking for wisdom shows that you are wise already to a certain extent, but how does that happen? That made me think of just kind of you elaborating on that and saying further, how does somebody make the decision to either follow in their example's footsteps or not if they're being set a bad example? So how did you personally start to become self-aware? Because that's definitely something that you have achieved in your pursuit of bettering yourself. At a certain point, you recognized that needed to be done. So can you think of anything that triggered that for you specifically?
I can't think off the top of the head. I can't think of any triggers necessarily, but I can tell you how I was raised, and like my older sister and my parents, like anytime I would start saying something that was in service of my ego or making an excuse for an example, like it would be cut down immediately, and I'd either be made fun of or humiliated, not in like a terrible, like my family was abusive way, but like
you would feel
yeah,
you would feel that like hot shame wash over you. You start to get a little bit sweaty in the back.
Yeah, exactly. Like there was a time when we had a dog and he was doing something that he wasn't supposed to doing, and this is in high school, and I was hit puberty late, so I didn't have the deepest voice, and I would go, "Hey, Bear, stop it," and then right in the front of the whole family, my dad goes, "You don't have the deep voice in here. I have the deep voice. You don't tell him what to do. I do." And I'm just like, But like little things like that make me go, okay, yeah, well, he's right. So, okay.
That's one of those little just like, be who you are, fucker.
Yeah. Know your place to a certain extent.
Yeah, like I'm the man of the house. Don't try to daddy up on anyone. That's me.
yeah, exactly. The things like that, like that absolutely cultivated some self-awareness around me. And I was really insecure in high school, and I think that insecurity, like super insecure in high school, but I'm really glad that happened, because that I think was another part in service to my self-awareness of because I was so insecure. In order to be insecure, you have to be self-aware to some extent.
Yeah, definitely. I would say that insecurity is an overabundance of self-awareness. Right. Like that anxiety is like being overly self-aware. If you're anxious, it's say in social situations, if you suffer from a social anxiety disorder where you are just hyper aware of how you are presenting yourself and constantly worrying about that is like just you are overdosing on self-awareness. You have too much of it.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. What about you? How did you come to self-awareness?
I would say the way that I was raised definitely played a part in it, the same way that it did for you. My dad was, I guess, critical, not in a bad way. Sometimes when he got mad, he would let you know, like he would raise his voice. He never got like violent or anything like that. But he, like if I had a chore to do and I did a bad job, he would be very blunt about that. Like, look at this, you fucked up here and here and here. You did a bad job. So just being raised by somebody like that kind of instilled it in me that it's, I need to notice when I'm just doing a bad job, I guess, subconsciously. But in terms of when I actually started to become more self-aware and realized that I needed to start making serious changes, that was caused by a combination of a lot of things. I was currently living in a really bad situation. That's when I was living at the basement at Judy's, and it was chaos. You were there several times. It's just constant screaming and arguing, and everybody fucking hated everybody else. And me being just generally, like I growing up in that household with my dad, being that he was very, I wouldn't even say strict. He was just, a no-nonsense kind of guy. Like, the house was not chaotic. The house was orderly. Like,
the house wasn't yours. It was his.
Not even so much that. It was just, like, behave in a civilized manner within the house. I wouldn't say that I ever, like, challenged his dominance in a way, because just the way he was as a father, I wouldn't have ever thought to do that. Like, he remains in my head to a certain degree now, to this day, like the ultimate authority figure. If I have a moral quandary, like, he is the person that comes to my head. Like, what would he think if I did X or Y? So he just, having instilled that kind of relationship between myself and him, challenging his authority was never an issue. It was just like, if I started making a bunch of like yelling in the house or something like that, he would be very quick to be like, hey, what the fuck?
Yep.
Not in those ways. He wouldn't yell what the fuck at me if I was 10, but it was just like, stop.
Yeah, and that's what I mean in the sense of like, it's not your house. Like, you're not controlling the energy going on in there,
Oh,
but
sure.
he's the one in control of this is what the volume level is going to be. This
Sure.
is who's going to be coming in and out. Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. He's in charge of what the rules of the house
Yep.
are. Absolutely, yeah. And those rules were they were civil. They weren't overbearing or
Yep.
anything like that. I wasn't, locked in the house and
Yeah.
shit like that. I would, you and me were the ones that were allowed out, and we always had to try to get everybody else outside. 'Cause they. But so that was definitely a part of it. But do we need to?
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead. Just blow my nose real quick while you do that. So whenever I first actually started to, I guess, actively become more self-aware was whenever I was living in a really bad situation, in a shit relationship, surrounded by just shitty people. So I was surrounded by examples of people in situations that I didn't want to become or be involved with. And that combined with the fact that that's when I got into psychedelics, which everybody reacts to everything differently. But for me personally, after the intense come up is over with mushrooms, I usually get very deep in thought, and my thoughts are very clear. I recently, within the last 6 months, 8 to 9 months maybe, was diagnosed with ADHD, and so I've always that's just relevant because the way that my thought patterns work a lot of the time is as I'm thinking about one subject, that one subject will branch off into several other subcategories of subjects that I'm then also trying to keep up with. And I never can because, it's hard to keep track of 4, 5, 6 thought strains at once.
It's like going deep into a Minecraft cave and not knowing how you got in there.
Right, yeah. It's like not leaving a torch trail behind you and expecting to be able to find your way out.
Exactly.
It's not happening.
Exactly.
Mushrooms were like the torch trail, basically. Whenever I was coming down from the mushroom trip, I was able to actually follow all of those different thought patterns. And so when I started thinking about just my situation and what I was doing to contribute to the negativity of my situation and what I could do to improve it and get out of it, I was actually just able to follow all of those different branches of thought that one thought would lead into. If I thought of how can I start improving myself? Well, I could start making money. Well, what's more money rather? What's one way that I could do that? Well, here's 4 different ways that I could do that all pop up at one time, and I would be able to go back and forth between thinking about well, I really enjoy content creation, so this is one way that long-term down the line I could monetize that, and I can think about different ways to do that. And then I would jump over to, I'm also into clothing and fashion or whatever, so maybe I could get into working with my mom's company at some time because I'm super into their military products, and I would be a huge fan of any civilian-type products that they make because I think that given the quality of their current work, it would be good stuff, beyond the fact that I think I could help make it look good. It would definitely be high quality. So just, I became more able to just keep track of my thoughts, and I would think more, generally speaking. And I started thinking more about more important things. And I don't know if there's a specific connection with the mushrooms in that just kind of train of thought that I found myself in, where I was thinking more about just important things at like a primal level, like survival, your ability to protect yourself, your ability to just feed and shelter yourself. And I just kind of had a really, really harsh shift from just kind of a lackadaisical, I don't really give a shit about a whole lot mindset to this, I need to figure out a way to survive. And not only that, but I need to just do better, generally speaking. I'm not, at that time, I would absolutely not say that I was a productive member of society in any way. I certainly wasn't being productive to myself. I wasn't making enough money. I wasn't putting away any money. I wasn't really pursuing anything that made me better at any given skill that would provide myself or my community any sort of value. And just combined with the fact that I was now thinking more, and I was thinking more in a just survival mindset, I think, just kind of more primal mindset, I would say. Like, that's the same time that I got really into martial arts, and I got really into music, and I got really into just physical fitness, generally speaking. So I think that played a part in just how I was thinking. You know, fighting is a very primal and just honest sport. You know, there's really no more honest way to prove that you are better than someone than literally physically dominating them. Mm-hmm. You know, like, I am better than you, and I am going to go out here and prove it with my hands. I will fight you to prove it physically. We're going to go at it.
And to figure out, just who you are entirely. Like, you're getting, like, especially if you're getting your ass whooped, like, you're figuring out who you are in that moment.
If you're just watching fights is intense. I mean, you feel something whenever you're watching fights, much more so than you do whenever, or me personally, I shouldn't say you as like a collective you to everybody, because some people just aren't into it. But me personally, I get very emotionally invested in fights, and it's not an intentional thing where it's like, I want to care this much about this person because I want him to win. It's, if I see somebody that I really like win a fight, I am genuinely happy for that person.
Yeah.
You know, like, I was losing my fucking mind when Derek Lewis won his most recent fight by flying knee in like 30 seconds. I was losing my fucking mind. I was so happy. And like 20 minutes before that, I was so goddamn sad when Tony Ferguson got submitted by Bobby Green. But beyond that, it's so emotionally drawing to certain people because there is so much on the line. Like you said, when you're in those moments, you are really testing your mettle. You are in danger when you're in there. You're in danger when you play a lot of sports. I mean, your brain is getting battered around when you're playing American football, but the objective of the game is not to hurt your opponent. You know, to a certain extent, you are tackling them, and you're probably going to hurt them a little bit when you do that. But the objective is not knock that guy unconscious, give him such traumatic brain damage that he is put to sleep by it. That's not the goal. And there's a certain level of humiliation that you are opening yourself up to if you put yourself into a sanctioned fight.
Absolutely.
If you're a man, there's a certain level of just shame that comes with being dominated by another man. It knocks you down a peg in a way that really nothing else can. And so, you really find out who you are when you're fighting. Absolutely. It shows you just kind of what you're made of, whether you're, like you said, getting your ass beat. Like, what type of person are you? I mean, I have no shame in admitting that I handedly lost my fight. He slugged the fuck out of me. He hit me really hard a lot of times, right in the face. But I am proud of the fact that at no point was I turning away, trying to get out of the fight, looking for a way out. I never dropped to one knee to try and stop the onslaught. It was just like,
or starting to cheat and trying to find
going for anything dirty or just some way that I could like turn the tides in a less than reputable manner. It's like, no, I'm just going to keep moving forward, and you can be proud of that. Even in those losses, I think that most people should, or every man at some point, if you're not going to war, you should probably have at least one fight.
Yeah.
You should fight somebody, like a sanctioned fight. Don't go get in a street fight, but go fight a real combatant that is trained to and trying to hurt
you. Yeah.
Because you're putting something on the line that you really can't put on the line in any other situation. And we've gotten off onto this tangent just because getting into something that is that serious just started making me think more seriously. These guys are putting a lot on the line, and I am extremely inspired by that. And I guess that, in a way, just kind of made me think, like, who the fuck am I? Like, what the fuck am I doing that's so goddamn impressive? Like, I come from a line of war veterans and people that I am extremely proud to share the blood of, but thinking about those guys and what they've accomplished, like my grandfather, it's like, what the fuck have I done?
Yeah.
So it just, the combination of my shitty living situation and just thinking more and gaining interest in more serious subject matters, I think that was the combination of causes for me becoming more self-aware. Just getting into things that made me think a little bit more seriously about life made me realize the urgency of my situation, and just the urgency of life in general. You know, it's a game of survival. A lot of people don't really think of life that way, and maybe they're better for it, not realizing just how quickly things can be taken from you, or how constantly in danger you are. And you shouldn't go around being in fear constantly because you're in danger. Absolutely not. That's not healthy, and you will not be happy living a paranoid life. But it is important to recognize the fact that life is fickle. It is very random and chaotic, and you need to be prepared to handle that chaos and that potential for just like a total uprooting of everything you think your reality is, because it can happen. And I didn't really realize that until I was 20. And so that's kind of when I started, I guess, becoming more self-aware and just trying to better myself, try to get in shape, try to eat better, figure out ways that I can make more money, just to, not because I'm concerned with money specifically, but because I have a number in mind that I need to just live comfortably. You know, I don't have wild, lavish fantasies of blowing a bunch of money on like yachts and private jet trips or anything like that. I just want a small house with enough space for me to live comfortably. If I have that, I'm good. And I started just trying to work towards that more.
Awesome. Fantastic. Self-awareness is key, one might say.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's very important that at a certain point in your life you do become self-aware and make the changes that you need to make to just be a good person. And I don't mean a good person as in just like somebody that people say, oh, he's a good guy. I mean a genuinely good person that is attempting to provide value to yourself and the people around you. And not in a grandiose way. You don't have to be donating to charity constantly. You don't have to be doing free favors for your neighbors or anything like that. But just actively try not to make things worse. Life is already hard. All you have to do is try your best to not make it any harder than it needs to be. And generally, I think the best way to do that is to find something productive to keep yourself busy that is valuable to you, that you find genuine gratification out of doing.
Awesome. Well, I think that concludes our episode for the day.
I think so.
Episode 2 or 3?
This will be 3.
Episode 3.
Episode 3.
We'll come back with a couple more stories next week, and until then, thanks for listening.
Absolutely. Yeah. Signing off, everybody.
Awesome.